Well, hey there. Just before we jump into today's episode, I want to tell you about our friends over at MAI Fulfillment. Now, they really are a smarter 3PL partner for e-commerce brands that need more than just basic pick, pack, and ship. Now, MAI handles the whole picture. Like we're talking D2C fulfillment, B2B distribution, retail-ready shipping, and inventory management. Like they handle returns and even a lot of value-added services, all backed by technology that keeps your orders, your inventory, and most importantly, your sales channels all connected. Now, here's what makes them different. With MAI, you're not just getting lost inside some massive, inflexible network. Like you get real systems with real visibility. And most importantly, there's real people who actually know your business. Like their warehouse team is actual MAI employees. Like they're not outsourced labor. And that means more control, like better accountability overall, and really a team that is trained to protect your accuracy, speed, and like most importantly, helping build your customer experience. And so whether you're scaling on Shopify or you're looking to expand into wholesale, managing maybe even a seasonal spike, or you're just kind of tired of feeling like another account number, maybe in a big box 3PL, MAI really does give you the structure to grow without losing control. So it's time to actually turn your fulfillment into a growth engine, not a bottleneck. And you can learn more about them and their process and their systems over at maifulfillment.com. That's maifulfillment.com. All right, let's jump into today's episode. Well, hey there. Welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I am your host, Steve Hutt. Now, today we're going to chat a little bit about something that I believe almost every brand that I talk to right now is wrestling with, and it's about using AI. AI doesn't actually know your business, and I think that's the key thing here. It doesn't know how you define revenue in a lot of cases, or how much customers are actually worth keeping. Or, I mean, even things like, I don't know, your Q3 or Q4 numbers, maybe they look a little bit weird and you just don't really quite understand. And so either you're getting confident sounding, I call this confident sounding wrong answers. I get this a lot by using AI. Or maybe, your team is burning through a lot of hours, feeding context every single conversation you have if you're using AI, instead of having like a persistent memory or a system to manage all of this. And that's the reason why I have my guest on the show today. His name is Bryan Mahoney, and he's the co-founder and CEO of a company called Chord, and that's CHORD.co. Before Chord, Bryan was the CTO at Glossier, and where he built the tech team. I think a lot of the data infrastructure really behind, I'd argue, Harley Finkelstein from Shopify talks a lot, and it's the poster child brand on Shopify. And I think a lot of DTC brand founders have certainly watched the incredible growth of Glossier over the years, the last decade. And now he's building what he calls a context layer. That word's been thrown around a bit, but it's very interesting about how Chord is doing it. And this kind of, I don't want to use his words, but this kind of connective tissue between your commerce data and then all these AI tools that a team, people are listening right now, that are using. And I think things Claude and Slack and all these different things. So my hope today is we're going to unpack what trustworthy AI actually is. I think it's a lot less about a model and it's more about the context layer underneath it. So, hi, Bryan. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. Excited to unpack all those meaty topics with you.
I know, it's wild. It's top of mind for me and it's top of mind for my listeners today. So let's just set the stage a bit. So before Chord, as you mentioned, you were the CTO at Glossier. What did you see inside that business that eventually led you and your co-founder to build Chord?
Yeah, I got started, you said a decade. It's been 12 years. I started working
even wilder
with the team at Glossier in 2014, if you can believe it. April of 2014 is when I first met Emily Weiss, obviously founder and CEO, and she had recently hired Henry Davis, who agreed to join her as president and chief operating officer. And I was based in Montreal at the time. I was running an agency who had done an awful lot of work in the early days of e-commerce and even before e-commerce, catalog commerce. So like my story predates Glossier. I think I wrote my first commerce application in 1997. So I'm that old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
OG.
when I met Henry and Emily, or Emily and Henry, they explained they wanted to create the channel of the future. And at that point, I'd been working in e-commerce for 15 plus years, and I was like, the channel of the future. What are you talking about? We know how to do this. It's a storefront, it's a shopping cart, it's an order management system. But they really talked about using the technology to get closer to the customer, to have the customer really be sort of like a part of the conversation. And I think that the rest is history there. Emily was obviously a visionary and had built up this following as an authority and used Instagram in a way that Instagram hadn't been used before. But there was just an awful lot of authenticity in what the team at Glossier was doing. And we did leverage technology an awful lot. We wanted to make sure that the digital experience was a huge part of your experience as a customer with the brand. It's a reason why we saw so many of our customers helping us reach our next customer. They were really excited to introduce their best friends to the brand, and a lot of best friends were made waiting in line in the queue at a Glossier store or online in some of the communities. And I talk an awful lot about today what it means to be an iconic brand or a next to be iconic brand. And I think like Glossier set a high bar for that. But what I saw was this opportunity to use technology to not move further away from your customer, but in fact closer. And I think in today's AI era, where there's this fascination about agents and making everything agentic, what keeps me up at night is my worry that we run the risk of losing some of the magic that is what brings me back to consumer and to brand and iconic brands every single day, is that connective tissue between the customer and the brand and the products that brand is putting out in the world that the customers really want to experience.
All right. It's interesting though, because I, like you, talk to a lot of brands, or at least I get DM'd in social a lot. And it's so interesting where a lot of them say that, hey, I'm doing AI right now. That's literally how they phrase it. And so I mean, I can guarantee you that you're in a different lens than a lot of people, because when you actually go and get under the hood of most of these commerce teams, I bet you're more shocked than awed about what's actually going on when they say doing AI. What does that actually currently look like for some businesses you've looked at?
Yeah, I have this bit that I've been doing where I went on this learning tour for the last month, and in multiple cities, whether it was in Montreal or Los Angeles or New York, and getting an opportunity to bring many commerce operators around a table, and instead of doing a demo, really facilitating an honest conversation about how we as an industry are, to use your words, doing AI. And what I'm finding, like we're back in this stage where the early adopters, they have a lot of individuals within their teams that are tinkering. And I understand why, like the technology on the surface can feel like magic. You ask a question and you get sometimes like absolutely the right answer, other times answers that are sort of confidently wrong, but it really feels like you can suddenly be an awful lot better at your job. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you this story. So I sat down with this analyst, and he pulled up this report that he had generated. And as soon as I saw the visuals, I knew right away that Claude had done it. And it was spectacular. And I was like, can you take me through the process of how you built that? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So I logged into a variety of different systems that I had access to. I exported some CSV files. I uploaded those CSV files into Claude, and you're right, I use Claude for this. Mm-hmm. I then wasn't able to extract data from other systems. So we had dashboards living here and dashboards living there. So what I did is I screenshotted those dashboards and I uploaded that to that same Claude cowork thread. And then I issued a couple of prompts, and boom, this report came out. I was like, that was amazing. And there's a big part of the Chord platform that is like analytics and dashboards. And I was like, is my business in trouble? Like, it's amazing what he was able to do. But he's like, yeah, but hold on a sec, Bryan, the numbers were all wrong. Like, he's like, the graphs looked amazing, but I knew, because I'm an analyst, that the chart was going in the wrong direction, as an example, or like there was a hallucination in these numbers. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. How did you fix that? And he said, well, I kept prompting it, and eventually I got to the right output. And so independently, I think that's okay. Analysts, instead of living in Power BI or in Looker and doing all that dashboarding work, conversationally, they're getting to outputs that are interesting. But then the light bulb went off for me. I was like, okay, well, you're going to go and deliver this to your senior leadership team tomorrow for this meeting. What are you going to do next week? And he's like, yeah, this isn't necessarily the most repeatable process. And, that's when I come back to this, like, we're all doing AI, I think there's an awful lot of experimentation that's happening right now within organizations, but there's not an awful lot of coordination. And I think worse than that, we are, and I encourage teams to think about this all the time, we can't lose our instinct to think critically. If Claude tells us to walk off a cliff, we shouldn't walk off a cliff. That is not the right answer. And so having this be this incredible technology that we have access to, making sure that we are setting it up to be successful, making sure that we are setting our organizations up to be successful is really important at this moment. And so I know it's said an awful lot, this idea of like going slow to be able to go fast, but in my mind, never before has that been more true than in this moment now. We really have to make sure that we are leveraging these tools correctly, that we are setting ourselves up to be successful, that we are, yes, measuring ROI and not just measuring how many tokens that we're putting into the token furnace.
Yeah, I know. This is crazy. And I think about, like, when they say doing AI a lot of time, and I've written a lot about this and talking to different point solutions, and we talk about maybe customer-facing kind of conversion layer type AI, which I think anything that kind of touches revenue, think about like chat bots and support agents, things like that, order status and returns. And there's a lot of ways of like in enhancing the customer experience, and just making sure like on-page personalization, leading content and merchandising. And we can go down this whole rabbit hole, even the operations side. A lot of people are using operational things in back office, demand forecasting and inventory planning. These are even a lot of fraud. I've had even fraud people on recently. There's a lot of interesting things that are available right now. We have this intelligence layer right now through a lot of these frontier models. It's just like, but how are you using it? And I think one of the conversations that come up, and you use this word, I went to LinkedIn and was kind of like creeping around here, but you use the word context layer a lot.
Yeah.
And I think, a founder that's maybe just hearing this context layer for the first time, can you explain what that actually is? I think that's an underpinning of the whole Chord platform.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to explain it. And you're absolutely right. There's an awful lot that is being written right now about context. You're even seeing the frontier models themselves, like advertising how important context is. And I read this piece, now almost probably 6 months ago, I think, that the team at OpenAI, they talked about their approach in a very technical, almost white paper-esque way about how they built context for their internal product analytics team. Because even sitting on top of the most powerful, arguably the most or second most powerful reasoning model in the world, that wasn't enough, for them to be able to ask natural language questions and to be able to get reliable answers. They needed to build, I think in their case, like this 7-layer context cake that was able to get at the right answer in a way that was deterministic. I think that's important. When we think about these frontier models, they are largely undeterministic by design. And say what you will about how the shitty experience building dashboards and having to rely on dashboards are. Yeah. Dashboards don't change their mind from one day to the next. You ask the same question, you're going to get the same answer.
Yeah. It's interesting too. And I wrote about this. I'm going to put a link in the show notes about that. But what's cool though is that it almost seems like there's this surrounding information is kind of like the context layer. I think about when I think about AI and search engines and maybe even like the human reader that goes along with all of this, and then how to correctly interpret and use this information. And I think, it's almost like, it's Yeah, it's so interesting to me because it's like at the end of the day, we want to kind of understand like do you trust the data? Like who wrote it? Where did you get it from?
Yeah.
When? From whom?
Yeah.
And like a lot of these assumptions, like what are the assumptions of where this is all being built on? And like I think having a source of truth, I think that's where the context, quote unquote, layer comes into it. It's just like if we're bringing these pipes in, do we trust the data? And can we make exactly like the example you made about like this? There could be some hallucinated dashboards and things that look great on paper, but is that really what's actually going on? They actually, these models sometimes corroborate their own story incorrectly. I think that's the craziness around the context layer.
Well, they're there because they want to do a job, and if you ask a question, their job is to give you an answer. And I think we are going to see a maturation of what context means, and in Chord's case, I like to say that we're a data foundation first, and then a context engine that sits on top of that. And we've made the very intentional decision to build very close to the data. And I had someone on. I have a very nascent podcast, and I had a really thoughtful commerce and data leader on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the fact that he had a background in machine learning and data science, and he said, the challenge back then was always like, how do we get the data into a place where it is clean, it is trustworthy, and so then we can deploy these machine learning models on top of it, and we can do reinforcement learning, and we can do like real data science work. And in his observation, this move towards AI and AI adoption, like people have forgotten that work is still really important. That you can't just deploy AI on top of either silo data or data that is untrustworthy. It's that responsibility hasn't gone away. And so the first thing that Chord does, or like layer zero in our approach to context, and we've borrowed some concepts from what OpenAI has done, is we have a multi-level approach to context. But number one is, do we trust the data? And so, Chord brings in all of your data. We're going to unify it. We grew up building dimensional models for our data, and dimensional modeling is a concept that makes it easier for analysts to be able to go and do their work. And dimensional modeling, you're going to see, or it is my belief that dimensional modeling is going to evolve or needs to evolve when the consumer of that data becomes agents and not necessarily analysts. And so we do an awful lot of that work on day zero to be able to then build further context on top of that. When I think about further context, I mean things like definitions about how your business works, things like domain knowledge. What do we know about commerce that you can ultimately use as a benchmark to make sure that the answers that we're providing to you are in fact the right answers? What about rules? What about how decisions are made? How about logging and auditing all of that? And so we have a certain design for what we're calling our context stack. I think it's a design that will be quite applicable across commerce generally, whether a brand decides to use Chord or build it on their own. But again, going back to this learning tour that I was talking about before, the other example that I give when I think about these individuals within organizations tinkering is that markdown files are not organizational context. They are, by definition, quite siloed. You don't see how they evolve over time. There's no audit log. A lot of the governance, like the unsexy stuff that we don't want to have to deal with, are really important when it comes to building trust and understanding how the systems are ultimately evolving over time. And so without getting too technical, again, at Chord, we think about that, having a centralized approach for maintaining this context and making sure that whatever surface you're choosing to use Chord within, whether that's logging into the platform or inviting Chord into Slack or inviting Chord into your Claude, those rules still apply, that there's a place you can go and sort of see who created them, why they were created, and how they've evolved over time.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense. So then we have this, I guess, this data layer or this data foundation, I believe you call it. And so you kind of get that set. Then you build a context layer, and you have a process that goes along. That's part of this onboarding process, is multi-layers of building this context. And then it sounds like the platform then matures a bit based on these pipes, the context layers, I'm going to go plural here, because lots of things that go along with it. Now we move into things like either the AI itself or agents that have a particular roles based on the data that has access to and the context that it understands about the business. So can you talk about the agents layer from within Chord,
Sure.
and maybe give a case study or something, or like a real world example about like, here's an agent that's used quite regularly and has a really great ROI?
Yeah, I mean, I think the data analyst as an agent is the first one that we started to build. I mean, before you can hire an agent to do things like go manage my spend for me across all of my channels, you better make sure that you have access to data that you trust. And I think that the best way of sort of dogfooding that is to, what's great about these agents and the access that we can give them, the data that we can give them access to, is that if you think about the traditional way that maybe a senior leader would ask for a report, you'd have this idea on sort of a Sunday, and you'd go into Slack on Monday, and you'd ask the data team, hey, can you pull this report for me? And then the data team would say, well, I built that dashboard for you like a month ago. Did you just check that? And you're like, well, no, I didn't have time. Can you just pull the report for me? And then now, like Wednesday, you get the report, and by Thursday, you've looked at it. Like, we can't operate at that speed anymore. So having these agents, an army of them, that are like waiting for you to ask a question and like really happy to provide an answer is where we got started ultimately. And I'll be honest, when we first launched these analyst agents, because we had a legacy analytics product, most of our early adopters would first start in BI. They'd make sure they had the answer they wanted, and then they would go and ask the agent to see if the agent was able to get the same answer. And I was like, that's, as someone who was looking at the product analytics, I was like, that's fascinating. Okay, I see where we are on like the trust adoption curve. And then as our agents started to get smarter and smarter, the behavior became inverted. They would first start with the conversation, and then they would go and fact check it within the BI platform that Chord makes available. And increasingly, we're seeing very little traffic within traditional business intelligence. It's all within the conversational interface, because trust has been established. From there, other agents that we've been able to build and introduce have been things like anomaly detection. So moving beyond the role of just the ad hoc answering questions, can you monitor for deviations, and can you infer what I want to monitor based on the conversations that I've had? And so we call these monitoring agents. Things like the ability to deliver insights for you based on paid performance. And so how can we take all of that context that we have, but then put it into a wrapper as someone who is an expert in understanding what's happening within your different paid channels, and make different recommendations so that you can lower your acquisition cost. We have always had, as a part of our platform, the ability to synchronize data out. It's not just about data ingestion in, but activating data out in the form of audiences is one example. We work an awful lot with CRM teams, things of that nature. So finding your high performing audiences and suggesting different ways of reaching out to them, and connecting those audiences to your downstream platforms are other things that our agents have been able to do. And the future for me is making sure that we have the tools available and the infrastructure to run the agents, and all of the observability and the logging, so that as agents make decisions, you as an operator can see what decisions are being made. But ultimately, I want to give our brands and our operators the building blocks for them to build their own agents. They know their businesses better than we do. That's all a part of the platform today.
So it sounds like, I guess the technical term that's been thrown out a lot right now, I think I follow a fellow, Nate B. Jones, out of Seattle, product guy, AI guy, and he's got a really good YouTube channel. And it's interesting, I've learned a lot from him, and he uses the word harness a lot. And he feels that, and the reason why he uses the word harness, because he feels that the intelligence layer that's built into these frontier models, the benefit, and I believe this is what's happening with Chord right now, is when you have this harness on top of multiple models and pick your model as needed based on the work or the agent that needs to do the work that's most efficient. We're not all just going to use Fable 5 just because it's just, and that brings up another interesting conversation. I think that's where it's expensive, number one, massively funny. My son's working on a Roblox game right now and he asked for an API key and I said for Anthropic and I gave it to him. And then so he selected Fable 5 as the, as the model. And like he burned through $20, like literally in half an hour. I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
So I guess my point about the harness thing, and I think the challenges right now, and I think that's where you guys fit into it, is I think you're being really deliberate maybe to not necessarily compete with Claude or OpenAI. Like you're not Anthropic or that's not what you're doing. You're using those models, but you're building this harness on top of it, and you're kind of like a frontier model agnostic, so to speak, almost. If I'm putting words in your mouth, but.
No. We have a number of different failover modes too.
Okay, good.
We are using, so we have a number of different pipelines that are working alongside of context to be able to, again, make the outputs a little bit more deterministic, to be able to learn from those outputs. And so we are using the most efficient versions of those models along the way. Like our incentive structure is to become your source of truth, become the operating system for the agents that you're hiring to run your commerce operation. Our incentive structure is not to have you use the most amount of tokens possible. And I think the thing that we're not talking about yet, but bringing it back to ROI, because we are still in this, like as an industry, I think in this tinkering and building and experimenting phase. But when we get back to ROI, it's not just about, like, first we have to trust the output. And I think you don't think as much about cost at that point because you're still understanding what are the limits, what's the limit of what's possible here. And like, forget the hype for a sec when everyone's like, oh, your business is going to be transformed overnight and all these sorts of things. Like these things take time. But I think once we're past once we've bridged the trust gap, and I think context is ultimately what gets you there.
Right.
When we have to think about ROI, the more context you have, the less reliant you are going to be on multiple round trips to the models, having them do, like, using Fable 5 because it has to infer an awful lot more from your data because you've skipped over, like, doing that hard work.
Right.
And it's not going to be efficient. We're going to get to the point, we might already be at that point where humans are going to be cheaper than tokens, which is amazing even for me to say that. But I look at the costs, believe me, and I'm not trying to sell a product that isn't, that can't one day be profitable. So I think about this an awful lot. And maybe it's early to sort of say that context is the unlock for efficient use of these models, but I kind of think it is. And you're absolutely right. We're not competing with Anthropic. We're not competing with OpenAI. Like, what I want to do is I want to show up and say, hey, what if I can overnight make your Claude 5x better because now it suddenly understands your business? And if I can make your Claude usage 5x more efficient, like, that's a nice value proposition. And forget 5x. What if I can make it 10x? And so that's what we're working towards. And I feel pretty excited about our progress.
It's interesting too is that there's even like a lot of hype happening right now too about open source models. I think through Z.AI or this GLM 5.2, it's very interesting where, for a lot of like regular kind of like hardcore knowledge workers and, summarize these documents and give me your insights based on this, that, and that, and then people have done a lot of research and compared the frontier models from the biggies versus, some of these open source third-party models, and it's interesting kind of what's out there and what's available. And like, talk about cost savings. Well, I mean, an open source model is just a hosting plan to run it. And so I'm sure that context is available for you and anybody in the future, knowing that that's available, not just frontier models.
Yes, for sure. I'm going to out myself here a little bit, but I am a tinkerer as well, and I've been, like a lot of people, playing around with OpenClaw. When I first got it up and running, I was using my Anthropic keys, and then I was like, wait a sec, this is, how much am I spending? Yeah. And then, like, shifting it, it's been a really great, I'm very careful about how I use it, and anyone listening, I would encourage you to also be super careful about how you use it. Right. But it's been a really interesting testing ground for me to flip back and forth between whether it's OpenAI models or Anthropic models, and then some of these open source models, and the utility that I get from it, it's like 90+% the same when I'm using some of these open source models. And so it's interesting, like the more work I do, training it, being thoughtful about skills, providing context, like organizing my shit essentially,
Yep.
the more I'm able to extract real value from the, in air quotes, less sophisticated models.
I want to talk about some case studies. As I think it's really important to get a little bit, maybe not directly the ROI, but I like people to hear. They get warm and fuzzy when they hear, "Hey, these people over here at this premium brand, look what they did. Here's what their life was without Chord. They came on board, implemented one or two of the agents. They have the confidence of the context layer. The pipe is all set up from a connection perspective based on the use case that they want to get out of the tool. Is there any one that kind of catches your eye, or that you can share publicly, or anecdotally, that maybe if you're under NDA from a brand is saying, "Hey, here's what their life was without us, and they came on board. Now here's their life."
Yeah, I mean, we have a number of case studies on the site, and what do I like to say? I love all my children equally.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
But I'll tell you another story. I'm like this sort of like the doing AI. So large beauty brand on the platform, largely chose to invest in Chord because they had a really expensive technology stack and was probably overbuilt relative to the size of their business.
Okay.
And not only did they want to sort of like right size that and lean into AI, but they really wanted to challenge their teams to think differently and to operate differently. And it started with the CEO, who is runs a big board, but is like, he is not afraid of rolling up his sleeves and sort of getting in there. And he built his entire board deck in Claude by connecting it to a number of different disparate data sources. Yeah. He kind of went rogue. And he's the CEO. And so he's sort of allowed to go rogue. And then his IT team basically turned off his access because they're like, it's amazing what you did, but we probably shouldn't do that. And then we had just, I always want to have a product roadmap that is like 3 or 4 months ahead of when our most forward-thinking customers, whenever they might need the next feature. And we had recently re-engineered our sort of like core conversational tool to be built on top of an MCP engine that we were building, because increasingly we were coming across people just like the CEO who just was building in Claude. And I was like, well, you got disconnected, but what if we were able to reconnect you to Chord and all the data that we have access to on your behalf, right, in a way that is governed and in a way that has been blessed by your IT team, and we can deliver that to you all over MCP, and these are the different tools that we've been able to enable. And now we're bringing together the operators that want to move quickly with the IT team that is constantly been challenged by, we are not moving quickly enough, but it is also our job to make sure that we are keeping our data safe and we're keeping our customers' data safe. And I love being able to show up and be the sort of the peacekeeper between those two. And so to give the CEO or the executive team what they want to be able to move quickly, but in a way that the technology team can actually get behind. And those are some of my favorite case studies. So it's not just 20% ROI here or reducing CAC by that. It's sort of like really bringing teams together by allowing them to get the most out of this incredible asset that they're sitting on top of. And I'm not talking about AI. I'm talking about the first-party data that they have been accumulating for years. Like the first-party data has always been gold. And I think as an industry, we have struggled to extract value from it because there's been, it's just hard. We're getting closer than ever before with AI to being able to really get the most out of that data that our customers have really trusted us with, and they expect us to deliver great experiences on top of that data.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I see that Chord really is kind of built for brands. They're doing, at least as an entry level, we talk this ICP, this ideal customer profile for Chord. And this is like a 20 million plus brand typically. Can you talk about why the ICP it has a decent starting point of around $20 million in annual revenue? So I'd like to talk about that. And then maybe as a follow-up, we can kind of talk about some of those early stage brands that do have product market fit. Maybe then they're in the $2 to $5 million range because they need to be doing something to mature themselves up to Chord to be at this $20 million range or plus. And so to talk about those two different types of ICPs and what you believe people should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, they might be different in terms of the stage of their business, but from a mindset point of view, they're the same. These are companies that don't want to have to buy 25 different point solutions and then hire a big team to put them together. And so perhaps a company that's a little bit more mature on its revenue curve realizes that in order to get the most out of AI, they need more of a consolidated approach. And so we're a sort of a logical fit for them. They have a technology team. Forever the conversation has been like, do I buy something or do I build it? And my answer has always been, you should buy, then build. And so we tend to really resonate well with some of those brands that do want to do some of the building, but they want to be able to partner with a platform like Chord to be able to accelerate that. And then on the other side of that, you have these brands that have maybe just launched, have that product market fit or scaling really quickly, and they want to future-proof their technology stack. So instead of buying a bunch of point solutions only to get a year or two in and realize that they need to replatform, well, when your business is really scaling, that's the worst possible time to be thinking about doing digital transformation or sort of platform consolidation. So they are of the same, they're trying to get to the same goal, which is to, like most of us these days, is do more with less, but without affecting the end product that we're putting in the hands of our customers. And so, yeah, we want to meet customers where they are. We tend to use these revenue bands as a proxy for the amount of money perhaps that brands are investing to acquire customers, win customers back. And I think the product that we have today, we can make those efforts an awful lot more efficient. So you can get more customers in the door for the first time and back in the door for the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth time.
Yeah, exactly. How does Chord look at marketplaces? Because I know right now we're talking more about an e-commerce platform, call it Shopify or whatever. And then, but there's lots of people that know that you have to be on Amazon. It's a non-negotiable, even in a select SKU. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, we think about like when omnichannel is the new D2C. No, I mean, we support most marketplaces. Okay. Yeah, we support most marketplaces. It's really important. It is a challenge when it comes to data. Like Amazon, we've got really great support for bringing Amazon data in, whether you're selling on Amazon or you're advertising on Amazon or you're doing both. And we're always looking to expand where we're getting data from so that we can give you as a brand a really holistic picture of how your business is doing.
Right. Okay, that's cool. I just want to be sure about that because I think there's people that are definitely listening. They know that the only way they can expand out, and then there's even the B2B opportunity, which is a lot of brands are thinking about too. It's a much larger opportunity than the direct-to-consumer brand, and people are thinking a lot about how they can get their product out into more hands, which is net more revenue for the brand. Anyways, so what about the first 90 days? I always talk about this on the show. When someone takes on a platform and they get on board with Chord, can you kind of walk us through like what the first 90 days or at least first month or so, what does it look like when they're onboarded? And what are the expectations from both the brand and then from your company? Yeah,
I mean, I'll make this independent of Chord. I think to set the right expectations anytime you're looking at any product is that, and especially one that is leveraging AI, is you're going to get out of the platform what you're going to put into it. And so we have become an awful lot more thoughtful over the years in terms of like, for the first 2 months, really what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're setting up the right foundation, that we're getting your data in, especially if you're a brand that's been around for a little while. It's not like you're showing up with no data. Yeah. You have real data. So we want to establish confidence right away by making sure that we understand your data and we're giving you back the same numbers or near enough the same numbers that you as an organization have been looking at for some time. From there, we start to learn more about your business, and we help you to train the model to really establish that organizational context. And then early on, we will have said, okay, like what are these one or two different use cases that we are going to go after together? So instead of promising you everything 2 weeks after you drop a pixel on your site, only to deliver nothing, we want to be really focused on, okay, you're struggling with audiences. Let's really focus on these audiences. You know, maybe there's a churn problem. Let's go and see how we can deploy something that is going to go and tackle this individual problem. And then I always want to earn permission to be able to go after bigger and bigger problems within the organization once the foundation has been set. So that's why we would typically push for. We're encouraging our new customers to try us out for 2 months. It does take 2 months to sort of get to that place where we can be tackling these use cases. Sometimes it can happen faster, but that's normally the time that it takes.
Yeah, this is amazing. And I also see that as far as like the current go-to-market right now, obviously with your data analyst is kind of like the initial one, and then, you know, audience and targeting agent and spend optimization agent, and there's some other kind of more generic agents for question clarification, things like that. You're also building a lot. Like, I'm not sure if you're building in public or if there's a public roadmap, but I see quite a few in queue or aspirational agents that you're building too. So I really feel that you fully understand, based on your operator background, you truly understand all the parts of merchandising and loyalty and pricing and forecasting and returns and all the, you know, retention systems. And so I think you're thinking a lot about that because you've executed on that traditionally through Glossier. And so now you're bringing all that back into the fold into a data powered solution.
Yeah. I mean, there's an awful lot on our roadmap. I think the foundation is there to be able to build just about any agent today. Mm-hmm. I have always found that the best software gets built with real world use cases, and you know, sometimes that's called a design partner, whatever the case may be. Instead of telling an organization or sort of saying like, just hire these 10 agents and then, you know, you're good, your hands are off the wheel. Yeah, the honest answer is it takes time to build trust in these processes, and these agents aren't fully autonomous. No matter what hype you're reading, these are workflows. These are workflows that come from the minds of humans that have been on the front lines, that have been operators. They need supervision. Yeah. I want to design a platform where we're keeping the humans in the loop, where we're giving the humans sort of superpowers, and so. I really challenge our product team to think about building tools and then really extracting from real world use cases, from some of the work that our customers are doing, things that are reusable and generalizable to other customers, as opposed to pretending that we have a fully baked solution that works for anyone that is operating in this, you know, this wonderful world that we call commerce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is amazing. So we've covered a lot today, and I really do appreciate your time. It's amazing. I'm blown away. I'm literally on my third page of notes. I've scribbled down like so many things, and it's so interesting. I'm so all in on kind of what you're building. I feel that there's a lot of fragmented tools out there. Some of them are great. They're still running off these frontier models, and maybe they have decent harnesses, but they really are point solutions to solve a very unique problem. And I think the maturity that where you're at and kind of where you're headed is the fact that, you know, these brands that are, you know, upwards of 20 million plus, there are people like that are listening onto the show right now. If that's you, and you feel that, you know, you want to create your competitive moat and continue to grow the business, but you want to implement AI with a source of truth, with a context layer and all these agents, what do you believe the next steps are? Because I know that we kind of talked offline before recording, but I just want to make sure that we kind of direct people to the right place based on maybe the next steps to learn more about Chord.
Yeah, I mean, I think find us on our website, easiest place, so chord.co. I'm pretty active and responsive on LinkedIn as well, whether it's, you want to talk about what we're building at Chord, you want to sort of, just talk shop generally about, how you and the organization are using AI. Like, I love this stuff. But yeah, that would be the easiest way.
Okay, beautiful. And then I understand that there's going to be a little offer for these brands that fit the profile that makes sense based on where they're at, and then the value that you guys can bring. And what's that offer all about?
Yeah, so we're offering 2-month free pilots right now for qualifying brands. We have a couple of slots left as we move into the summer months here. We have a small but mighty implementation team, so there's a limit to what we can take on. But yeah, we're always looking to work with iconic brands who are looking to make that next step towards leveraging AI the right way. AI that works, AI that can turn on investment, AI that can make the humans in the loop just so much more capable.
Yeah, this is amazing. Well, thanks, Bryan, for coming on the show. I'm going to have everything in the show notes. I'm going to shout out to your podcast. Brilliant Commerce is the podcast. I'll put a link in. I'm going to follow it now, and I'm going to put details in the show notes. So I wish you continued success. Thank you for really digging deep into this industry, because I've been in commerce for a really long time now, nearing 20 years, and 6 years in Shopify, and now 5 or 6 years with this. It's like, I feel blessed to have the opportunity to speak with you today. Honestly, I've learned a lot, and cheers to you and your team.
All right. Thanks again for having me. This was great.
Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of eCommerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.